Here we go. Video number 9 of 10 total on what kind of angels? Killer angels. Michael Shara, welcome to the Allegatia Society. I'm here with Dr. John Wilsey. Welcome back, friend.
Killer. It's killer.
Yes. And students, what was going on Tuesday? Marching. Yes. What was going on most of the day on Thursday? Marching. A lot of marching. These guys we're like so soft today, aren't we?
We are so soft.
Most of us. I know you're in pretty good shape. Most of us are pretty. I mean, these guys we said earlier, remember they would march a marathon and then fight. I mean, good grief. We are not like that now. Okay, here's what we're going to do, friends, to start our discussion in this video of day 3. Now here, the thing is, I don't know, honestly, Dr. Wilsey, I don't know how well they're going to be able to see that, but actually, hold on just a second.
Expand it.
Hang on just a second.
Do you need me to tell you how to do this?
Yeah, probably, to be honest with you.
See the green, hit the green. There you go.
Okay, now tell us where we are. We are midday day 3, but we are going to be wrapping the whole thing up here. So have at it.
All right, so I'll first direct you to, can you see my little arrow?
No, you're not screen shared.
Do I need to be?
Probably.
Okay.
Remote control.
You disabled participant screen sharing. You got to let me.
It should have just given you powers.
Powers.
The power.
I am controlling your screen now. You see my arrow?
It's still not showing up on my screen, but it does say that John Wilsey is controlling my screen.
All right. Well, I don't know why that is, but if you'll direct your attention to the lower right-hand corner of the map, you see Gettysburg Campaign, Battle of Gettysburg, situation about 2:30 p.m.
That is very precise.
3 July 1863, just prior to the Confederate attack.
Okay.
All right. Notice the whole fish hook shape of the Union lines, which are in blue.
Yep.
You've got Slocum and his 12th Corps is holding Culp's Hill against Edward Johnson's brigade down here, his division, which is down here over on the far right-hand side. You have Howard and his 11th Corps. You have Gibbon. You have Sickles. You have Sykes and Sedgwick down there in reserve, all along the upside-down fishhook. And this is the position of the Union Army held after they had been driven through the town. So you can't see my arrow going back and forth?
No, for some reason you're controlling my screen. But oh, you know what? I think, can you click on annotate? Will it let you get to the tools?
Yeah. Okay. How about now?
No. But that's kind of crazy.
How about let's see. Can you see me do this right here? You see the green in the upper left-hand corner?
Oh, there you go. Gotcha.
All right. That's the Chambersburg Pike. This is the direction that Heath came down to go get those shoes on day 1.
Okay.
Seminary Ridge is where you see the Confederate lines, the red lines. That's Seminary Ridge.
Got it.
McPherson's Ridge is the one right behind it. So it's McPherson's Ridge is down here where it says AP Hill.
Okay. Yep.
That's McPherson's Ridge. So all that was contested ground on day 1. Ewell had driven the Union troops through down through the town and up onto the heights where they are now. Day 2, Longstreet had attacked. Here's Hood. Here's McLaws. Longstreet had attacked down here, where Little Round Top and Big Round Top are. And Ewell had attacked on the second day up here, where Howard and Culp's Hill, Slocum are right there. So that's where the battle had been fought on days 1 and 2. But nothing had been done in the center. So Lee's logic was that Meade had strengthened his left and strengthened his right against direct attacks on day 2. On day 3, Lee's conclusion is they must be weak in the center. But what, unbeknownst to Lee, Meade had had a council of war with his corps commanders the night before. They all agreed to stay. They all agreed to take a defensive posture. And Meade warned Gibbon, who is here, if Lee attacks, he's going to attack on your front.
Yeah.
Which, of course, he does. Now, if you notice, you can see the dispositions of the Confederate Army. And the attack was according to these motions here that we see on the map there. And that attack began at about 2 o'clock with a massive artillery bombardment. So the guns of the Confederate Army, the Confederate Army had about 150 cannon. That sounds like a lot. The Union actually had about 270 artillery pieces. So they far outnumbered. But Lee's army had about 150 cannon. And they opened with a cannonade, a barrage, to soften up the Union center with all of their guns, all 150 of them, up on Seminary Ridge. And their cannonade lasted for about 2 hours. It was the largest artillery bombardment ever seen on the North American continent.
Wow.
Gibbon wrote a memoir of the Battle of Gettysburg about 20 years later, and he said that he'd never heard or seen anything like it in his life, anything to ever compare to it.
Wow.
It was truly an awesome event, and it was meant to soften up the blue line up here.
Yeah.
But unbeknownst to the Confederate artillerymen, for most of the cannonade, as destructive and as powerful as it was, they were overshooting the Union line. So most of their artillery were hitting back behind the blue lines and not doing the damage that they needed to do. What their objective was to destroy the Union artillery and also to soften up and kill as many infantry defenders as they could.
Real quick, Dr. Wilson, can I bring us back to talk mode?
Of course.
Okay, let me okay, yeah, there we go. And yeah, sorry about that. So I just wanted to have the big picture here. So that do we know why?
Why what?
They were overshooting. I mean,
I am not 100% sure how to answer that. I think it was I mean, it was just a mistake, just an error. I could be wrong. Military may have something to say about that.
Yeah.
It was an imprecise kind of a thing, and they thought they were doing damage, but
yeah. Okay.
One of the things that happened that did make them think that they were having an effect was when the cannonade began, the Union artillery began to answer them by firing back.
Okay.
But after a while, I believe it was Hancock that ordered the artillery on the Union side to stop firing, to make the Confederates think that they had knocked out their artillery.
Okay.
Which they had not done.
Okay. So what I want to do, thank you for that, by the way. What I want to do here is wrap up the day, which brings it all home. And then we want to spend a little bit of time, hitting some big picture questions. Like why are we talking about all this? So I guess in a previous video, you had us at about halfway through the day on Friday, July the 3rd. What happens next?
Pickett's charge is the climactic moment of the battle. It involved about 15,000 men. Some historians say 12,000, some say 15. It's somewhere between 12 and 15,000 men. Led by such people like Lewis Armistead. His nickname was Low Armistead. His friends nicknamed him Lothario because he was sort of a ladies' man. They called him Low. They called him Low Armistead.
Okay.
Low was a brigade commander, and he had been friends with Hancock. They had been friends in the old army.
Okay.
And Shaw talks about their friendship, and he's got that right. Both of them were very sentimental about their friendship. And of course, Lewis Armistead is leading he's a brigade commander, and his brigade actually crests the ridge. They actually make it to their objective point on Cemetery Ridge, but they're surrounded and cut to pieces. Armistead is killed in the attempt. You can go to Gettysburg Battlefield and see the spot where Armistead fell up on the ridge. The ridge. The attack was, of course, a failure, but it was. You read say Gibbon, like Gibbon's memoir of what he saw when the cannonade was going off. Gibbon did not know if this was preemptive to a major attack or if this was sort of a parting shot. This is what they were going to do before a retreat.
Oh, okay.
To cover a major retreat. And he didn't really know. He, during the cannonade, about 2 hours, he thought, this could be a retreat. But then the cannons stopped firing, and he looked out across a mile of, between the Confederate and the Union lines, and he saw the Confederate soldiers advancing, and they were spread out. They had about a mile to go across the field. They had to cover that ground. They had to climb a couple of rows of fences. They had to cross the Emmitsburg Road, which you can see on the map. And then they had to climb up the ridge and cross a stone wall, which was about chest high. And they had to do all that under cannon fire, under the fire of canister and grape shot. Canister shot and grape shot were you load into a cannon, and it's basically lead balls, and it turns the cannon into a giant shotgun. So when it fires, hundreds of balls come out, and it's anti-personnel.
Woo!
Gibbon even goes so far as to describe what the cannonballs looked like when they were coming in from the Confederate. So if the cannonball was a round ball, you could see the ball coming from all the way across the field. And you could see the direction it was going to take.
Yeah.
And a cannonball sometimes they would explode and sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they had a fuse and they were timed to explode above you to scatter shrapnel and kill personnel. And sometimes they were just solid shot, and they would land and they would bounce and ricochet, and they would take out people as they would bounce and ricochet. And you could watch all of that happen too. But then other artillery was rifled. So you wouldn't see those until the projectile aimed down, and then you could see it coming down, and then those would always explode on contact. So Gibbon has all these descriptions of all these different artillery rounds coming in. And then he would describe what the Union artillery rounds would do when they were firing at the Confederate lines as they were coming on. And the Confederate lines were coming on, 15,000 people is a lot of people. So a long, wide line, and then it was 3 deep. So if you were up on the position, it's pretty terrifying it's a pretty terrifying sight. It's a glorious sight. Even on the Union side, people said how it was breathtaking.
Mm,
The martial beauty of the thing, because they're all veterans.
yeah, yeah.
They're marching, they're marching in order, and they're marching by brigade, and there's 15,000 of them with all the battle flags, and they're in perfect order. It's like something you would see on a parade ground. You
Wow.
had the officers on horseback riding to and fro, giving orders, and the men marching in perfect order, like a great machine, like a monstrosity of a machine coming towards them. But then the Union artillery opened up on them, and their great gaps would be torn in the midst of these formations. But the men were veterans, and so they were disciplined. They simply closed up and continued on. They took down the fences, or they climbed over the fences. Grape shot, canister shot would open up on them, and it would take out scores of men. There was forget who this was. It was some artillery officer that ordered his men to fire grape shot when they were within about 50 meters of their position.
Mm.
As soon as the cannon went off, heads, knapsacks, rifles, arms, legs all flew up into the air all at the same time. So it was extremely destructive. Armistead's brigade made it to the top. The men, as they were marching, were to guide on a clump of trees that was on the very center of the ridge. And if you go to Gettysburg today, you can go to that clump of trees. It's not the exact trees that were there, because it's been 160 years ago now.
Yeah.
But they're the children of the trees that were there.
Mm.
The clump of trees has an old wrought iron fence to protect them. And so the same clump of trees has been preserved. And that's what's known as the high water mark of the Confederacy. Because this is sort of the climactic moment. This was the strongest and the most determined that the Confederate Army was in the course of the entire Civil War. And after Pickett's charge had failed, and it was obvious that it was a failure, because they were killed and captured on the field, then from that point on, it was all downhill for the Confederate Army.
Yeah. So what are we looking at in terms of casualties on day 3, give or take?
Day 3, the casualties on the Union side were comparatively light. They did sustain casualties that morning in the engagement against Johnson's troops. But they sustained casualties in the cannonade, but they sustained comparatively light casualties in the assault on the ridge by Pickett's charge. Pickett's division and the attached units to his division amounted to about 5,000 men. About 10,000 men did not return. They were killed, wounded, and captured.
Wow. One day.
In 1 hour.
In 1 hour. And when you look at overall casualties of the Civil War, are we talking about 600,000?
Yeah, there were 625,000 deaths.
Okay.
There were and that's just deaths. So, casualties are killed, wounded, and missing.
Right.
Captured.
Exactly.
So about 625,000 deaths, and over about 1.5 million casualties.
And so right here we have 10,000 in an hour. Absolutely horrific, really unimaginable.
Yeah.
So that brings me to kind of landing the plane here. You've answered this question over the course of several hours of our discussions here. But what I want to do now is give our students something very concise, even bullet point like.
No pun intended.
No, yeah, right. No pun intended. And even as few of them as possible. What are what we might call the decisive factors
in the battle
of the whole 3-day battle? If you're really just looking at big picture, 2 or 3 decisive factors that led to the Union victory.
I would say on the Union side, the actions of Buford in seeing the value of the lay of the land early on,
Okay.
before there was ever a battle there,
Okay.
his determination to secure it and to hold it,
Okay.
and be there until the Union Army had come up. That's one. Another one would be Hancock and Howard securing the heights at the end of the day on the first day and using that as the rally point for the troops, and encouraging Meade to bring up the whole army. They
Okay.
saw that position for what it really was, a fortress. Meade, in not being sort of bullheaded, listening to his lieutenants, his corps commanders,
Okay.
and trusting their judgment and their leadership on the ground, and supporting them when they asked for reinforcements and to have the battle fought there. Colonel Vincent Strong, Gouverneur Warren, seeing the necessity to occupy Little Round Top and that high ground. And of course, Chamberlain. Chamberlain's in the book. He's in the book for good reason. And
yeah,
Chamberlain, I said earlier, was sort of a self-promoter, but he did hold that ground, and he did perform that textbook maneuver.
Yeah,
that broke the Confederate assault up Little Round Top,
yeah.
which is covered, extensively in the book and in the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
The main thing, to sum all it up, the success of the Union on the ground at Gettysburg can be summed up like this, I think. The wisdom and the determination and the courage of the mid-grade officers, colonel, brigadier general, and up to corps commander.
Okay.
But especially the mid-grade officers, the colonels especially, they were the ones that, when things looked like they were hopeless, that they were gonna hold ground and not panic. For one quick example, if I may.
Yeah.
On the second day's battle, I believe it was Wright's brigade that was marching up on to Cemetery Ridge. It may have been somebody else, but I think it was Wright's Confederate brigade. Hancock sees that there's absolutely nothing standing between that brigade and the Union center.
Okay.
And he needed 5 minutes. He needed 5 minutes to bring up support from another corps commander in order to meet that Confederate onslaught. But he looked around and there wasn't anybody there. It was completely denuded of troops. And here comes this entire Confederate brigade coming up the hill. There was one regiment. Now, a regiment is a third or a fifth of the size of a brigade. It was the 1st Minnesota Regiment. I forget the colonel's name that commanded that regiment, but Hancock said to that colonel, "You see those Confederate colors down there?" And he replied that he had. He said, "Take them." So this man was outnumbered 5-1. He took his whole regiment down there, and just to buy 5 minutes of time, 1,000 men went down there, and only about 100 came back. Less than 100 came back. 90, they suffered 90% casualties, and they were overwhelmed by the Confederates, and the Confederate advance continued. But they bought the time that Hancock needed. If it wasn't for the 1st Minnesota, the battle could well have been lost. I mean, stories like that. Even on the 3rd day, we think about Pickett's charge being hopeless. Meade was ready to. He had written out orders to withdraw the entire army during the course of the charge, because Low Armistead's brigade had taken the crest of the hill yet again. And Meade was ready to withdraw the entire army on the basis of that one thing. So, but the mid-grade officers kept their heads.
Yeah.
The colonels, especially the brigadiers, they were the ones that were the key to the determination of the Union to hold that ground. In contrast, on the Confederate side, the mid-grade officers were the ones that lost their nerve.
Oh,
So on the second day and on the third day, you know, they had attained the heights, but they were unsupported. Remember how I've mentioned that?
mm-hmm.
You know, those brigade commanders got to the top and they looked around and the promised reinforcements weren't there. Extra Billy Mahone, that was his nickname. He was supposed to be a reinforcement for General Wright. A general named Posey I think he was from Florida. He was supposed to support Mahone as he supported Wright. And both of them were dawdling in the woods at Seminary Ridge, literally sitting around throwing acorns at each other while Wright's men went up there by themselves.
Wow.
Robert Rhodes' whole division was supposed to support Early's division. Early's men attained the heights on the evening of the 2nd. They got up there, looked around, looking for Rhodes's men. They weren't there. Rhodes lost his nerve. So those mid-level commanders underneath the corps commanders, they lost their nerve. They didn't carry the thing home. When, you know, if they had, it would have ended up very differently.
That is, you know, score one for middle management.
Middle management, they won the day for the Union. One other thing about the Confederate loss is the absence of Jeb Stuart.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I think if I summarize the Union victory by the success of the middle officers, the summary to the Confederate loss was that they were a day late and $1 short. If they had attained Gettysburg and the Heights on June 30th, which if Jeb Stuart had been with them, they most certainly would have done. Then they probably wouldn't have even fought the battle there. They would have fought the Battle of Gettysburg somewhere else. It would have been not at Gettysburg. But the battle as it went would not have gone the way that it had. I mean, I'm not huge into alternate history. I do think that alternate history can be interesting, especially for people who don't really like history, because it's kind of fun. I think.
Yeah, right. What could have been?
You know, Ewell not attacking that position on the night of the first day.
Yeah.
If Ewell had taken over after Jackson had died, Jackson had been the Second Corps commander, and then of course he died at Chancellorsville. So Ewell took over in Jackson's place, and had Jackson been in command, he most certainly would have taken the hill. Most certainly would have. But then again, it's the same thing. It's well, would the war have been won for the South? Well, probably not, because the Union Army was not up yet. Those 3 corps were, but
yeah. Okay. Well, then
else.
Well, okay, perfect. That just leads me right into our final question. So what you're saying is, if the Confederate Army had come away with a victory, you don't believe you still don't believe they would have won
on the first day. If the victory had been complete on the first day, that would not have necessarily meant the end of the war. There would have probably still been another engagement. But okay. if they had won the battle on the 2nd or on the 3rd, I think that the Army of the Potomac, after losing so many battles over the course of 15 months, that they would have just disintegrated, and it would have been a war-winning victory on that battlefield if Lee had won, and we would be living in a very different scenario.
Well, I mean, and that's, yeah, I mean, this thing has global implications. It would be a very different world even today. How about one last statement, Dr. Wilsey, on the significance of the Battle of Gettysburg in the big picture? Let's just finish with that. And this has been absolutely amazing, but land the plane.
Gettysburg is the decisive battle of the war, in the sense that the war, of course, will go on for another 2 years, and the bloodshed and the massive casualty numbers are not going to stop now.
Yeah.
July the 4th, the next day after the 3rd day, Vicksburg fell.
Yeah.
And when Vicksburg fell, Vicksburg is also a decisive moment in the war, because now the Mississippi River is closed. Texas is cut off from the Confederacy. Confederacy split in half. So strategically, this is a major blow to the Confederate cause and a major coup for the Union cause. But Gettysburg does something in the morale of the Union troops. They had lost so many times, but this was a decisive victory for them. They had decisively defeated Robert Lee, and they could see that the Army of Northern Virginia was beatable, that they had it within them to do it. So the average man in the army knew that now we can beat these people.
Yeah. Which is
unfortunately for the overall cause, Meade did not pursue Lee as he retreated. He on the 4th of July, they stayed and they glowered at each other across the way. They didn't fight, but there was a huge thunderstorm late in the day on the 4th. And the Confederate Army used the thunderstorm as cover to withdraw and head back to Virginia. And they crossed the Potomac, but Meade did not pursue. He waited to pursue until it was too late. So Lee had gotten away, and Lincoln was furious. He was absolutely furious that Meade had allowed Lee to get away. But he couldn't be too angry with him because, after all, Meade had defeated Lee on northern soil and had, prevented a major disaster of epic proportions, existential proportions. So he knew he couldn't deny that. Meade would remain in charge of the Army of the Potomac all the way to the end of the war. But it also meant, after the fall of Vicksburg, that Ulysses S. Grant would be elevated to command all of the Union armies everywhere in both Western and Eastern theater. And Grant remained with the Eastern theater. He remained with the Army of the Potomac, and he instructed Meade in 1864 and 65, wherever Lee goes, you will follow. So with up until Grant, you would have a big battle. The Union would be defeated and would retreat and go into winter quarters or go and lick its wounds. And Lee would be given another chance to recover and to strengthen himself and to take the initiative again.
Yeah.
Once Grant comes into command, those days are gone. When the fighting season opens up again in 1864 in Virginia, they fight the Battle of Spotsylvania, and the Union Army is absolutely mauled by the Confederate Army. But the next day, instead of going off to lick their wounds, Grant's army's on the move again to try and turn Lee's left flank. And with every battle is a tactical loss for the Union, all the way down until Petersburg. But after every battle, Grant is reinforced by replacements. Lee has nobody to replace everybody he loses.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of attrition now. So he can win the battles on the battlefield, but ultimately it's just a matter of time. And Grant knows that. So when a battle is over with, the next day they're fighting again. That battle is over with, the next day they're fighting again. So Grant keeps up the pressure on Lee and doesn't allow him to withdraw, to refit, to gather more men or anything like that. He doesn't give Lee a chance to hide.
Yeah.
And that will do in the Army of Northern Virginia. And the Western theater, Sherman, George Thomas and then William Tecumseh Sherman both gather their forces to just pummel the Western armies down through Georgia, down to Atlanta, up in Franklin, Tennessee. And then, of course, Sherman goes through Georgia, burns everything down, up through South Carolina. And the war's over with by April and May of 1865, when the Confederate Army just doesn't have anything left to give.
Dr. Wilsey, I think you seems inadequate. But
man, this is so much fun. How could I possibly want anything else other than the pleasure of being with your students?
Well, I mean, I knew that when I asked you if you'd be willing to help us with this, and your answer was a very, very swift
Oh
affirmative.
yeah, yeah.
Really quickly, Dr. Wilsey, is there any some of the students are, they're going to be watching this thinking, holy smokes, this guy, how do I hear more from this guy? Do you have an Instagram account or anything at all like that you'd like to share if students wanted to follow you?
I have a very massive problem with social media.
Okay, so that's fine.
No, I don't. I do have a Facebook account, and anybody's welcome to follow me on Facebook. But I have to say, I'm not on Facebook hardly at all.
Before we, okay,
I don't do social media.
that's okay. That I just wanted to give you the opportunity if you did.
Yeah.
Really quickly, talk to me a little bit here about writing project you're in the middle of now. Again, I just want, if students are looking at this thinking, I've never seen a historian like this guy. You've written a number of books, and why don't you just share those with what you're doing and what you've done and what you're working on, and we'll land this plane.
Yeah. So my area of research is nationalism and conservatism. I have a book called One Nation Under God, an evangelical critique of Christian America. I have another book called American Exceptionalism and Civil Religion, reassessing the idea. And both of those books are on Christian nationalism and American exceptionalism. I have a biography of John Foster Dulles. Dulles was the Secretary of State under, those are two books. My book on Dulles was the Secretary of State under Eisenhower. And so I have a biography of him. I have an abridged edition of Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville.
Yep.
And then I'm working on a book now on conservatism and religious freedom. And that book is going to be published next year. I'm almost finished with it. I'll be done with it in the next few months. And that book is really written to young people. And that's my audience is your students and a little bit older. I'm trying to argue that, when people hear the word conservative, they either think crazy man, like January 6th.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're thinking, like My Pillow guy or Trump or something ridiculous and absurd. What I want to say is conservatism is deeply inspiring, and you should aspire to be a conservative because it's an inspiring kind of a worldview. Conservatism is a disposition. It's an attitude.
Yeah.
It's not just about politics.
No.
And ultimately what I'm trying to argue in the book is it's for young people, right? Conservatives are the ones that conserve. And what are we conserving? We're conserving the American constitutional tradition. That's what we want to conserve. That's what we want to protect. And young people have the most to gain from that conservation.
Right.
And the most to lose if our constitutional tradition is lost. So that's what this book is about. And then I have another book that's going to come out in 2026 on Christian nationalism. It's written more for pastors.
Okay.
And then I'm working on the papers of John Quincy Adams for a book in a series that Cambridge University Press is putting out on political. It's called Political Writings of American Statesmen. So I'm doing the John Quincy Adams volume.
How did you have time to spend hours? We've been doing this for hours, my friend.
I don't have time, man. I got work to do, but hey, you're Bruce Etter. When Bruce Etter calls me, I'm going to be there. Period.
I appreciate it.
Period.
I will say this. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying some of this, but I'll finish with this. I've changed my attitude considerably over the last several years because of where our culture has been going. I've really changed my approach when it comes to Christians and what they should do about college. And, I'm convinced that we need to start seriously looking at good Christian colleges for our students. And that's why I just wanted to plug Boyce a little bit more, because it's one of those. My daughter just graduated from Cedarville University. I think that just in terms of theology and philosophy, those two schools are fairly compatible. And so students, if Boyce wasn't on your radar, this is what you're looking at. You're going to have professors like this guy of the highest quality. And I don't think some Christian families realize, they hear the names of these big schools that have these big football programs, and oh my gosh, and they don't realize that the meat and the substance, quite honestly, is found in a lot of these Christian colleges. And I didn't even know about the honors college. I'm really thrilled to hear about that. So, well, let me close it out. Students, you should have finished the book, Killer Angels. I want to spend one more video just kind of bringing it all together. Dr. Wilsey, what an absolute delight it has been to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And best of everything, God's grace to all of your students and their families.
Thank you, brother.